Hello and welcome to another edition of The New Crossroads, a video blog focused on the Internet of Things and the role that Indiana companies and the state of Indiana is playing in the present, but also in the future of IoT. I'm pleased to be joined on this edition by Stephen Reynolds, partner at Ice Miller law firm. Stephen, it's always great to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
And we're both very pleased to have a very special guest. Our interview this month is the Chief Information Officer at Columbus-based Cummins, Sherry Aaholm. And Sherry, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Very excited.
I'm going to start with a very basic question. A lot of people have a lot of different definitions for what IoT is. In your role at Cummins and as you look at the IoT space, how would you define IoT?
At Cummins, we view IoT as part of a bigger thing we refer to as digital. Mm-hmm. So for us, digital transformation is really important. And when I think of digital, I try to describe it in this way, that it's taking something physical, capturing digital characteristics about it, and then translating that back into a physical experience, utilizing that product with your customer or even with your employees. So it's this whole concept of going physical, digital to physical again.
Yeah. Talk about your role at Cummins, and maybe to even step back a bit. You came to Cummins from FedEx. Mm-hmm. You were in the IT area there. So talk a little bit about your background and now your role at Cummins.
Yes, so I have an extensive background in transportation and logistics. I started out working for a trucking company for several years while I was in college, and then moved over into a freight forwarding company, and then from freight forwarding went to FedEx and worked with FedEx Global Logistics, Supply Chain, and of course their overnight package and ground delivery system. So I had a pretty significant technology background in working for that organization. I've been at Cummins now 4 years. I came into Cummins to actually help with the transformation of IT. And as we've gotten into it, of course, the whole IoT and digital aspects have just taken off, and it's fabulous to actually be in a what some people might think of as a old, quiet manufacturing company.
Right.
And it's actually taken off in a very wild and crazy way about how we see the value of digital and IoT to the company.
Yeah. Sure, that's great, Sherry. I know some of the things I've seen, the press releases about new products that Cummins is putting out and new technologies they're using. You talk to us a little bit about how Cummins is leveraging the Internet of Things.
Yes, so from that perspective, we view it in really probably 2 to 3 primary ways. One is, how can we use IoT to actually change our customer experience? The second is, how can we use that information that we capture from those physical devices? And in our case, it's going to be the engines or the power generation sets. And you may even be surprised to learn that we have sensors on filters we sell that we actually integrate back into. So we take that information and actually marry it up in a third way then for how do we go about taking how our customers are using the product, what we know about the product through the manufacturing process and the quality process, to actually re-engineer an experience for a customer, as well as engineer and change the way we may manufacture or sell product. Quite interesting.
That is interesting. Sounds like it's making a better solution for the customer too. At the end of the day, they'll have a better product or more usable result.
Yes, because our concern is about making sure that we have reliability and uptime for our customers. Really important. I think one of the fascinating parts of the job that I get to do is I actually get to go work with customers. So you actually get to see what are the problems and the issues they're trying to solve. And in many cases, it's not just about our product. It's actually how our product is used with other products in their environment. But even in some cases, like we did recently, we were trying to solve an issue for small and medium-sized fleets where they said, we don't have a way to deal with the electronic logging mandate that's coming up in December, which might be fascinating because you would think, hey, we make engines and power generation sets. Why would we care about that? And we did because our customers cared. So recently, we actually, earlier this year, launched a new company, ZConnect, that's got a free application now for people to meet the electronic driver logging mandate. The reason we went into that wasn't just for that, but it allows us to capture additional information in when those fleets are actually using that product about the vehicle and the engine itself. So we saw it as a way to get data too.
Yeah. Let's talk about data, what's powering the Internet of Things, and that's data centers. Cummins certainly generates the power to keep these data centers running. First, help us define data centers, and from there tell us more about how you keep these data centers, which are so critical, up and running.
Sure. So from a data center perspective, I guess the easiest way to explain it to folks is when you think about those applications that are on your smart devices, because all of us have smart devices, and we have applications on there. Those applications actually live somewhere, much like I live in my house, they live somewhere. They live in data centers. So they're running on hardware, infrastructure, and application support in these data centers. Now, carry that further and think about how dependent you are on those applications. So from a data center perspective, the folks who have those, like Microsoft, Cummins, Google, any of the big companies have a data center because they house their applications in those data centers. They care about your availability and uptime of those applications, because imagine how dismayed you would be if your Google Mail account didn't work for you for 5 days. You would not be very happy. So part of the IT industry is all about how do we guarantee that availability and uptime. And this is a little bit of where Cummins comes in then, is because one of the most largest factors that a data center needs is power. You can't run the data center without power. You can't run your home PC, if you take that analogy, without plugging it in somewhere and having power if the battery runs out, right? So a data center is very much the same way. And the challenge you run into is power is unpredictable. So you can't control what happens with the local utility. You can't control the weather. You can't control anomalies that could actually occur as easy as somebody digs up a power line and cuts the power off. Okay. When that occurs, the data center has to have the ability to maintain running. And a lot of times, having run data centers in my past, it's about how do I keep that data center going for a period of time until I can make a decision. Will I move those applications to another alternate data center so you don't see anything different on your mobile device? The generators that we manufacture and sell to those large companies is all about guaranteeing that power availability. So when they lose power, the generators kick in automatically. And why is that important? Because applications are finicky. So when they crash, if they come down because of a power outage, they don't come back up very easily. They don't recover well. And so having standby power is critically important so you avoid this unnecessary blip in power. For us, what gets even more interesting in this is companies like Microsoft. What we do with them is we actually have software on that genset, that power generation unit, that allows us to tell their data center real time, the folks running the data center, the availability of those generators, the fuel in those generators, when do they need to be serviced. So if you're responsible for that data center, you want to make sure you know what's going on because you're depending on that device to kick in as soon as you need it.
Wow, that's just a fascinating technology to me too, and it seems like a great use case for the Internet of Things for an IoT device.
Absolutely.
It's just one of those, I think there's a lot of focus on kind of the consumer products, but this seems more like the industrial kind of Internet of Things.
Yes.
In this space. You mentioned the data centers. I understand I saw one of the press releases in light of the hurricanes. I'm from Florida originally, so my parents were without power for a few days during the storms, and I saw there are some uses for these too, for like hospitals and other kind of critical infrastructure. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I talked about the data center, but we provide power generation units to far more than data centers, to hospitals, to industrial side, to airports. You'd be surprised. I think we're even powering the Statue of Liberty.
Oh, wow.
Okay? So just keep that in mind. All that backup power we're all dependent on it. We're more dependent than ever on power, and that's what those gensets or those power generators actually do for you, is enable that. And so when you have something like Hurricane Irma that came through, this gives you the ability to have appropriate power for a period of time while you work through alternate plans. Because if you took Irma, you couldn't even get fuel into Florida. Yeah. But at least you had, in that standby power, you had fuel that could last you up to a week.
Excellent.
Yeah. Beyond powering data centers, Cummins is known for powering engines, machines. That's what you're known for. Specifically engines. Tell us about what you're doing to use connected devices to better manage those engines in the field.
Yes. So we've been doing this for several years, actually, and it started out by something we call data logging. So we actually, for our test vehicles, because you may not notice, but there are test vehicles driving around with our engines in them. Those test vehicles, we were capturing information off of those engines and bringing it back in-house, and we're utilizing that information to marry up with our test cell information to tell us product issues before we launch the product into market. What we quickly realized is that information is not only valuable to us, but it's incredibly valuable to our customers. So if I could begin to tell our customers that there was going to be a problem with that engine before that problem occurred, we actually improve their uptime and availability, because anytime that vehicle is down, they can't deliver freight, they can't mine, they can't actually run marine, so all those create a challenge. So part of what we did is we moved from loggers into something we call connected diagnostics, which was real time on engines. We actually can tell you when that check engine light comes on. We know the proprietary information about the engine, not what is standard public. We know the proprietary information, and that proprietary tells us, can we run that engine more hours? Do we have to bring the vehicle in for service right away? We tell our customer that information proactively. That has moved now into us not only telling customers that information, but now us providing concierge type services for them, where we're telling the mining companies that we're working with in South America, for example, we're managing their fleets for them in the mine and telling them when they need to take it out for service, when they can continue to push it forward, actually extending the life of the engine by several thousand hours we're capable of doing with this technology. So in further, recently, this past year, we went even further than that, because our customers say to us, well, now that you know about the engine, can you help us with fuel economy? Can you help us get better utilization out of that equipment? So one of the things that we announced late last year and the first part of this year is something we call connected software updates. So what we actually do now is, for our customers, we have the ability to real-time recalibrate the engine over the air for them, based upon what we're seeing on fuel economy. So the customer controls it, but we actually will push that update out to the vehicle and then apply the vehicle at the appropriate time, because we care about safety, obviously. So when you're driving, we're not going to apply an update. But that is revolutionary for us. So it's a little bit like you've heard about Tesla. We're doing the similar thing.
As a quick follow-up, because as you're talking about that, we're talking about connected engines, I think of hacking.
Yes.
You know, how do you guard against that? How big of an issue is that? And this whole idea that someone could hack into an engine, a connected engine.
We take that very seriously, because of the fact for us that hacking isn't just about somebody getting inappropriate information, as I would care about as an IT leader. This is actually about safety. So it's the safety of somebody operating that piece of equipment, so we care. So we go to the extent of, we have our own proprietary IP, product offering for how we deal with that, through encryption, through security keys. And what we've welcomed is we've not only brought in white hat testing or external companies to test us to try to hack our capabilities. We also have our partners, our original equipment manufacturers. They actually try to hack us too. So we go through that rigorous level of testing before we brought the product into market, to just make sure we were concerned about that very thing, that we don't want to be hacked inappropriately. The other part to think about, though, is we push that information to the engine, but then there is control on the engine itself as to when that update is applied. So we manage that also in the engine. So there's multiple layers you have to go through to actually understand how that is applied on the vehicle.
Well, that makes perfect sense. And I practice in the area of data security, so it's always top of mind to me. But I was a computer programmer, so when I think about this too, it seems that the ability to push out these updates also is furthering the security too of the vehicle. Wouldn't you think so? So that's a means of adding an additional layer of security as you have this ability to push out updates.
It is, because you even if you hacked our transmission, you were able to somehow hack our transmission. You can't actually change what happens on the vehicle. The vehicle's got another set of control on it, and that's validating that software that was pushed to it, the quality of that, and the encryption keys that we're actually looking for in order to apply that on the vehicle. So it is a very different process. And because of that, it means it's IT and engineering collaborate together in how these solutions work. It's quite interesting.
Let's move into the factory. How do you see IoT shaping operations on the factory, on the many factory floors at Cummins?
Yes. I think what a lot of people may not already recognize or understand is we already do, to an extent, IoT on the factory floor. In order for us to capture information, we capture the life cycle about that engine while it's actually traversing on the factory floor. So we're going to know from when it got originated to its process of how it's actually manufacturing, all the way up through the test cell quality, when it's actually being tested before it's released out for sale, for availability of sale. So we already have that information today. What we see is the next level for us is actually taking the information coming real time off of the vehicle, marrying that up with information we have on the manufacturing floor to predict. We want to actually predict quality issues before we actually find them in the field. So this is sort of a next evolution that happens now with big data and artificial intelligence, is this ability to massage and process huge, considerable amounts of data now to be able to make and get and figure out these anomalies that's in the information that it's telling you. What's more exciting for us that we see too is, can we now, once we understand that, actually create algorithms that we can push back out to the IoT device itself and do what we call edge computing. So instead of bringing all that data back, once I can process large amounts of data, I can create pattern analysis and move that pattern analysis back to the IoT device itself, which will be important, because if you talk to some of the folks in the IT world, they think what's going to happen is there will begin to be a restriction on the amount of data coming back to people, because people will start worrying about their privacy. So the ability to actually do that right on the device itself will be really important.
Wow, that's fascinating. And when you think about the vehicles and the connected vehicles, I know telematics is kind of a hot topic. I hear that word a lot. Can you tell us a little bit about, I think that's been going on for some years now, what telematics is, and then how it's kind of expanding with the Internet of Things?
Yes, we've been doing telematics for several years, and I would argue that telematics is actually just a version of IoT, because it's sensors on the vehicle. You're bringing that sensored information back into your large data lake that you actually have within Cummins, or we have a Cummins data lake that information comes into. So telematics to me was the early stages of us trying to figure out smartness about a vehicle. But now where IoT is moving more towards is, how does one vehicle interact with another vehicle? How does a vehicle interact with the surroundings around it? So part of what we're looking at is saying, how can I use that information and sense what's happening with my surroundings to say, oh, the vehicle needs more power going up this hill because they're driving up a hill, or the vehicle needs less power because it's going down a hill, or it's in high altitude. Based on high altitude, we need to adjust the fuel economy on the vehicle real time. So this is the power of all this interconnected allows you to do, is sense not just one thing, but items all around it.
That's excellent. And I know in addition to your current roles with the company, you also, I guess, are leading a new internal organization I saw in a press release,
Yes.
the Digital Accelerator. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. So short answer on that is, we recognize the importance of digital and what digital can do. From the telematics, we wanted to lift telematics up higher and say, no, we really care about how digital is applied across Cummins, not just in how we're doing things with our customers, but how do we drive things on the manufacturing side to reduce costs. And in that space, one of the things we recognized is that legacy or large companies like Cummins that focus on building physical products usually have very strong processes for how they design, build, and market those type of products, but they're usually multi-year steps. What we're talking about in this space with IoT and digital is this moves in months, weeks, and months, not in years. And so the reason we brought this together was we were very concerned about this idea of moving fast, trying something, failing often, might get squashed in a large legacy company that's very process focused on building traditional physical products. So that's why we brought it together. The other piece that we found is around skill sets. So understanding this is not about a physical product, it's about what's the user experience of the product they're using. How is that different? How do they think about that? User interfaces, screen designs, all very different. So we wanted to house that in an incubation kind of concept, initially at core, which is what I'm doing with the team, and then over time we will push it all back out across the company.
As we wrap up, as you look at challenges facing the world of IT, all companies, or many companies, look at talent as a
Yes.
real challenge. How do you see that talent equation fitting into the
Yes.
IoT piece?
So one of the things I'm really excited about Indianapolis and Indiana itself, is that we're so focused on saying we want to be that IoT hub for the Midwest. And that's really important, because trying to get talent off the East Coast or the West Coast to actually come in and work for companies in the Midwest is challenging. So what I'm really excited about is companies like TechPoint, that's local here, that's working with these startups incubation concepts is actually driving that need to bring that talent here. And I think the other piece, as I feel strongly about, you have to think differently, is Cummins wouldn't have been viewed as a software technology company. They would have been viewed as, if you want to be a mechanical engineer, you want to work for Cummins. We're changing that paradigm and saying, no, if you're a great software engineer, you want to be at Cummins too, because we're doing really neat things. So it's about attracting talent and getting talent to see that the traditional Midwest companies are not these, old product building, physical product building, that actually have a very different mindset about how they think in this day and age.
So you see, efforts locally to be a tech hub, to be an IoT hub, is really benefiting companies like Cummins?
Very much so. Very excited about that. And we want to play with that too. We want to play in that space. Because one of the other exciting pieces that happens too is the work that we're doing on this digital space and IoT. We're also, in some cases, actually partnering with startup companies, because they're bringing new thoughts and ideas to the table too. So the combination of the talent coming in because of the companies that are here, but also this startup mentality, is really important in the work that we're doing.
Sherry Aaholm, the CIO at Columbus-based Cummins, thanks for some great perspective and for joining us. Hope to have you on again in the future. And Stephen Reynolds, thank you for some great questions and for being the co-host in this edition of the new Crossroads. A reminder, you can download or subscribe to this video podcast at iTunes. My name's Gary Dick. Thanks for joining us this time. We'll see you next time.